They do. All right. So today we are studying something they're going to call processing requirements, which is look pretty familiar in a minute here. So we're in our sourcing cycle, and we've looked at recognition of need, specification of need, search for potential sources. Now we got to go out and ask the sources for some information. So the task is to determine methods to process requirements for goods or services based on cost, timing, existing contracts, competitive bidding as appropriate. Kind of long for RFI, RFQ, RFX. So RFX is the symbol that most people use. It's RF capital then small x. It means RFI, RFP, or RFQ. So the first one is the RFI, or the request for information. It's not a bid. You're not necessarily asking them for a price, although, you know, they can give you what I would call engineering pricing or a guesstimate, but you can't really bind them to that estimate. So when to use when you're looking for general information about a product or seller, you got a new supplier or a new product and you want to know more, engineering wants to know more. RFI doesn't have to have a set format. It can just be a simple email. I've used formatted RFIs in the past when I wanted to really generate a lot of interest in the supply base about something. When I was doing electric fans as opposed to clutch-driven fans for the engine. We didn't know much about it. Engineering wanted to know more. So I did a formal RFI. It looked really nice and sent it out to a dozen suppliers. And they came in and did presentations on what they knew about electric fans. Usually handled by email and spreadsheets, you know, brochures, catalogs, things like that. You're just looking for information from the supply base. Potential benefits can help develop specs, which is what we use it for a lot. Improve budgeting, you get better idea of pricing. You can assess supply chain risk and identify alternate processes or products. Potential problem. Information is usually not binding on the supplier. So if they give you budgeted pricing for budgeting, you can't really hold them to it. Although if they tell me it's going to cost $100 about ballpark, and then they come back with 5,000 on their actual quote, then, you know, I'm going to have a few words with them. If used too often, potential suppliers may refuse to respond. So if they never get any business and all you do is keep sending them RFIs, trying to pick their brain, and you never pay them, you know, they'll probably tell you to go take a hike sooner or later. The next one is the RFP. So you got an RFP and you got an RFQ. And there's a technical difference, although most people in the industry use them interchangeably. And that's okay. But when you're tested on ISM tests, you'll have to remember the difference between an RFI or an RFP and an RFQ. So the RFP is a request for proposal. So you're requesting a price and a method of project execution. So you've got a spec, but you don't really know how to make the part. The supplier knows how to make the part. So you need them to make the part to your specification. So you can use it when specs are not fully developed or uncertain. And you can also be used for complex products. So usually when we're using an RFP, we're using it for like the cooling system or the engine or something like that. That's very complex. Radiators at PACCAR, we use the engine cooling spec. So when we go send an RFP out for a new radiator at PACCAR, we'll get the cooling specification for the engine from either Cummins or the DOF guys. And we'll send that to our radiator manufacturers and say, build me a radiator that cools to these specs, and this is how much space you have under the hood, so make it fit. But that's a true RFP, because we're not telling them how to build it. We're not even telling them what to make it out of. We're just saying, I need it to meet these specifications, and here's your space under the hood. Potential benefits: leverages suppliers' knowledge and capabilities, which can lead to lower costs. Potential problem: writing and organizing RFPs can be time consuming and challenging. It requires a lot of time from engineering to answer questions usually. And supplier proposals must be able to be compared across different formats. So with the RFP, a lot of times people will lock them into a response table or something like that, because what the supplier wants to do is not be compared to supplier A on price. So what they want to do is some kind of package deal that the next supplier is not going to do, because it's a little bit different. So you can't, so it makes it tougher to compare. Then there's the RFQ, used to obtain pricing information from a fully developed spec. So a fully developed spec for us would be usually a drawing, a release drawing. So when you have a complete specification, suppliers can still request changes, or the SRDC, supplier requested drawing change. And it's, for an RFQ, it's build to print. In the PACCAR system, an RFQ is usually an RPI. Now we do RPIs for cooling modules and stuff like that, but most of the RPIs that we have that come through the system are build to print. It's like, here's the drawing, I think it's done, build it like this. And then the PPAP is to PPAP against, did they build it like the drawing? And if they have issues with the drawing, then they put in an SRDC to change it. So that's the difference. On an RFQ, you've got a completed specification, and all you're asking for is a price. On an RFP, you have an incomplete specification, and you're not only asking for a price, you're asking for a method to meet your specification. So with the RFQ, it's efficient comparing suppliers' prices and making sourcing decisions, because it's hard for them to combine stuff. When you got a drawing and say, how much? So potential problems: specification must be clear and unambiguous. This can be an issue. And sometimes suppliers' offerings are not equal in all factories. So not all suppliers have the same quality or delivery, on-time delivery. So it makes comparison a little more complicated, but not as complicated as if you're trying to compare on an RFP. So invitation for bid. So this is an RFQ in government speak. The government, when their purchasing people send out an RFQ, they don't call it an RFQ, they call it an IFB, or an invitation for bid, or they'll also call it a solicitation, which is like, yeah, I'm not buying used cars here, guys, but that's what they often call it, solicitation or an IFB. And with the government, it's almost always sealed bidding. Construction is also usually sealed bidding. Potential benefits: efficient method of comparing suppliers' prices and making sourcing decisions. So in a sealed bid, they'll say, we're taking invitations for bids on this solicitation. We'll open the bids at 2 o'clock on this date, and nobody can look at them until then. Same problems as RFQs. Specifications got to be clear, and the suppliers don't have the initial look at the spec to kind of help us with the SRDCs and stuff. If it's messed up, it's messed up. And then, suppliers' offerings are not all equal in all factors. But IFB, invitation for bid, found in the government purchasing. So here's a comparison of methods. So RFI is one to use when you're developing specs, gaining new ideas, potential problems. It's not a solicitation. The RFPs, when you got unclear specs or unfinished specs. and you're trying to use the supplier's expertise to meet your requirements. And sometimes it can be challenging to compare suppliers across responses. And then the RFQ is when you got a clear spec, a drawing, and you just want a price. And then the government is, the IFB is essentially the same thing as an RFQ. All right. Susan Dunkley, a supply manager for Acme, is sourcing packaging for a coffee brewer. There are many suppliers to choose from, and the engineer has written a very general specification for the packaging. Susan needs to understand the capabilities of the supply base to proceed. What should she do next? Want to guess?
D.
Yeah, I would go with request for information because it's saying here, very general specification she needs to understand. Let's see what they say. D it is. All right, I think we got one more here. Jake Brown is yet another category manager from Acme. He has a completed drawing for a set of metal brackets production is asking him to procure. The drawing does not need any input from the supply base. So what does Jake want to do?
C.
Yep, it better be C. Otherwise, I will be very disappointed with these boys. Wouldn't be the first time. Yep, C it is, RFQ. Got a completed spec. All right. And we don't have any stuff out there, but 6 questions out there. So why don't you guys go jump on them and we'll go over answers at 2:20.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
While we're going over the questions, can you just go back on that slide, the difference between the RFQ and invitation?
Oh, yeah. This one here.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
So it's essentially government seal bidding RFQ.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yep. To meet the start of production. All right, let's go over some answers here. Number one is Bravo. You would use an RFP, a request for proposal, when the requirements are vague. 2, Alpha. RFI, a request for information, can be used to find out more about suppliers' products or capabilities. 3 is also Alpha. does there are multiple solutions available and there's enough time to receive high-level information on approach and pricing. 4 is Charlie, because an RFQ or request for quote is used when you have a complete specification or drawing. In this case, they have a drawing. 5 is Alpha. Emily has a completed drawing. The red lines just need to be cleaned up. So once that's done, she can issue an RFQ or request for quote. And 6 is Charlie, an RFI, as defined as a solicitation of the method of obtaining general information. All right, any questions? If not, tomorrow we pick up with 2 days of insourcing and outsourcing strategies. All right, talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.